Strap yourselves in for this. A school teacher in East Sussex called a 13-year-old girl despicable because she wouldn't accept that a classmate identified as a cat. Now, you remember that story from yesterday? Yeah. Well, now it's emerged that kids across the UK are claiming to be horses, dinosaurs and even a moon. It's causing problems in class, not least, I don't know how they fit the moon into it, but there you go. I shudder to think whether or not the horse... Anyway, let's not do that. Anyway, it makes you worry. It makes you worry about the children who insist on being addressed as if they are animals. I'm joined now by Stella O'Malley, who is a psychotherapist and the director of GenSpect. Thank you very much, Stella. Why are we indulging children who think that they are animals? Shouldn't we, as adults, tell them to snap out of it?
Yeah, I suppose in many ways a lot of activists have shaped policy, and the Department of Education in the UK, in lots of different countries around the world, have been kind of racing to keep up while the activists have shaped the policy. And so an awful lot of teachers, and I have every bit of sympathy for the teachers, they are presuming that the right thing to do is to change every child's pronouns and names as and when they want, without checking to see if there's any sort of evidence base or research that actually supports this theory, and there isn't. And so we've never done it before. We've never had neo-pronouns, so we've never had pronouns like ze, zim, and they, fair, and you know, all the various hundreds of pronouns that are out there. And so now it's got to farcical levels where, of course, some children are just having fun and they're using, you know, I'm a horse and I'm a cat. Other children are very vulnerable and they get into it. And also there's other children who are very vulnerable, who might have difficulty with processing, who are caught in the mix of that and told that they're being bigoted if they don't follow the new name or the new pronoun. Yeah. We've got a mess, and it's frankly been shaped by activists. And I feel for the teachers who are operating in a vacuum of information.
Explain that activist element to me. Now, Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, did drill down on this a bit yesterday. She kind of echoed what you're saying. Explain to me how, in your view, a school or the education system being infiltrated by activists leads to a child thinking they're a horse. Yeah.
There are a certain small section of society who are very driven by gender theory, where they think anybody who says they are that gender, not only should they be supported by the whole of society, but also we have to speak of them and think of them as they wish to be thought of and spoken of. And they have become incredibly vocal and incredibly powerful. All the time they kind of brandish the fact that they say that they're powerless, and yet they have managed to kind of operate quite large-scale lobby groups and activist kind of organisations all around the different countries in the English-speaking population. And we have seen how they have infiltrated schools by providing workshops. And an awful lot of the time, teachers are going, I don't know much about gender. We're getting the local expert in. The local experts say they know everything. And the local expert is very often an activist lobby group who have one theory. What?
Yeah, or a nutter.
I think they believe what they're saying. I think where the line needs to be drawn is the Department of Education has to create policies that are sensible and rooted in evidence base and rooted in truth that we can back up and support, rather than theories about this. This is new theories, new experiments, new ideas that have never been tried before. And the schools are making a fool of themselves by allowing themselves to be swayed rather than waiting for a proper...
I think it undermines the parents, though, doesn't it? Because if at home you would quite like Timothy to not be a llama, but then for 6 hours a day at school, the teachers let him behave like a llama, then what do you do as a parent? And then it's not just that with the schools, though, is it? Because then you send them there, he doesn't just come home behaving like a llama, all of a sudden he's draped in a pride flag. He also thinks that this country is built off the back of a depraved, slave-riddled empire, and he hates the colour of his skin. I mean, it just seems like it's absolute madness. Do kids need saving from schools?
I think a lot of schools might have one or two very extreme viewed people who often work in the kind of the humanities, and they might like really be very into the new thinking around gender and critical race theory and stuff like that, and they can shape a lot of policies. I don't think the children necessarily fall in with everything the teacher says. The problem is the more vulnerable kids, because while it's funny some kid coming home, you know, identifying as a llama, that can be funny. Within this story, there's tragedies happening where very vulnerable kids who often have autism and other kind of challenging needs, and they actually fall in very deeply. They seek medicalisation. They might end up with a mastectomy, and they might really, really buy into the idea that they can be a different person. They can be whoever they want to be.
And this is vital.
And everybody else has to fall in with that.
But this is a vital point. Now, I think back sometimes to my school days, and although it wasn't a massively long time ago, the world very much has changed since I was at school. And kids who used to get a kicking, actually, physically, for being a bit different, now, I think, rightly so, would have more understanding of their needs and more help, really. And that's undeniably a great thing. But then I look at this and I think, at the same time, if we are dealing with some of these children who genuinely do think that they can identify as an owl or something, they obviously have other issues there. And instead of just everyone being told you just need to accept that Oliver is now an owl and the teacher's giving him a round of applause every time he hoots, is anyone actually looking at the psychological reason behind why this child wants to identify as a barn owl?
Well, people are. I'm a psychotherapist, and I certainly know other friends and colleagues. I'm in an organisation called GenSpect, and we're providing sensible guidance to schools, and we're providing sensible guidance to clinicians. But we are a smaller number, and a lot of people contact us privately saying, I don't dare to speak out, because it feels very frightening these days to speak out, and the online world is very vitriolic. So there are people with sense, but generally they feel embattled and frightened. And the people who are very loud and very vocal about it tend to be quite bullying online. And so there's one narrative that's being propagated right now. And you're right, those kids are really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And some of them might be being funny and smart, and, you know, I could imagine being that kid. But there's a whole other group who are lost and lonely and want to be something different and say, yeah, I don't even feel human. I don't feel like myself. I don't know who I am. And they grasp at whatever is going on. And they would be very vulnerable to different things.
Yeah, and unfortunately we haven't got time to really continue this, but I can't help but wonder whether we're seeing now the culmination of things like kids having video games and iPads shoved in their face from like 6 months old, and all of that stuff. I mean, there'd be loads of examples. I'm just not sure that is there not going to be some kind of link between children wanting to live in a fantasy and having a fantasy shoved in front of their noses every time they get on a plane with their parents, every time they go out for dinner with their parents, just to shut them up? But look, we'll have to continue this conversation at the time. Stella, I always really enjoy our chats, and it's great to speak to you, and I'll have to chat to you again very, very soon. It's Stella O'Malley there, who's a psychotherapist and the director of GenSpect. Some much-needed common sense, I think.